The rain came down in sheets that October afternoon in 1882, turning the dusty streets of Marfa, Texas, into rivers of mud. And Penelope Garrett stood on that auction block with her head held high, even as water plastered her dark hair to her cheeks and soaked through the thin cotton of her dress. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break, would not let them see the terror that clawed at her insides as the auctioneer's voice rang out over the crowd, calling for bids on her indenture contract, like she was a horse or a piece of furniture. Her father's debts had done this to her. 6 months ago, he had died owing more money than Penelope had known existed, and the creditors had come circling like vultures. Everything had been sold, every stick of furniture, every piece of her mother's china that Penelope had treasured since her mother passed when she was just a girl. But it had not been enough. The law said a man's debts could be transferred to his children. And so here she stood, 22 years old, and being sold into indentured servitude to pay for her father's gambling and drinking. The crowd was sparse in the rain, mostly men seeking shelter under the overhang of the general store, their faces hard and calculating as they assessed her worth. Penelope tried not to look at them directly, tried not to imagine what kind of life awaited her. 7 years, the contract said. 7 years of her life signed away to whoever bid the highest. The auctioneer was getting impatient, his voice rising as he gestured to her. Fine, strong girl, good for cooking, cleaning, whatever work needs doing. Starting bid is $200 for the contract. A man in a stained shirt called out a bid, then another. Penelope felt her stomach twist as the numbers climbed. She caught glimpses of their faces, saw the cruel twist of one man's mouth, the way another looked at her like she was meat. Her hands trembled and she clasped them behind her back. That was when she saw him. Tall and lean, standing apart from the others with rain dripping from the brim of his black hat. He had not moved to the shelter of the overhang but stood in the street itself, as if the rain did not touch him. There was something different about him, something in the set of his shoulders and the way he watched the proceedings with an expression she could not quite read. 300, someone shouted. The man in the black hat stepped forward. His voice cut through the rain, deep and steady. $500. The crowd went quiet. That was more than twice what anyone else had bid. The auctioneer's eyes lit up with greed. 500 from the gentleman. Do I hear 550? Silence. The other bidders shuffled their feet and looked away. 500 was too rich for their blood, especially for an indenture contract, going once, going twice. The auctioneer slammed his hand down on the makeshift podium. Sold to the gentleman for $500. Penelope felt dizzy. She watched as the man in the black hat approached, his boots splashing through the mud. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was a scar along his cheekbone, a thin white line that spoke of violence, but his expression was calm as he counted out bills into the auctioneer's greedy hands. The auctioneer handed him a rolled document tied with string. The contract. The paper that said Penelope Garrett belonged to him for the next 7 years. The man took it and turned to face her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, rain streaming down between them. Penelope lifted her chin, determined not to show fear. Whatever he planned to do with her, she would face it with dignity. He held out the contract to her. She stared at it, confused. "Take it," he said quietly. His voice was gentler than she expected. With shaking hands, she took the rolled document. She did not understand what he wanted, why he was giving it to her. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a box of matches. He struck one, cupping his hand around the flame to protect it from the rain. The small light flickered between them. "Burn it," he said. Penelope's breath caught. What? The contract. Burn it, you are free. I do not understand. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You just paid $500. I know what I paid. He held the match steady, waiting. And I am telling you to burn it. No one should own another person, not for any reason. Burn it and walk away free. The match was burning down toward his fingers. Penelope's hands moved before her mind caught up, holding the edge of the rolled paper to the flame. It caught slowly at first, the rain trying to extinguish it, but she cupped her hand around it the way he had done, and the fire spread, consuming the words that had bound her. She held it until the heat singed her fingers, then dropped the burning remnants into the mud where they hissed and went out. She looked up at him, this stranger who had just given her back her life, and found she could not speak around the lump in her throat. There is a boarding house 2 streets over, he said. Mrs. Chen runs it. Tell her Lucas Calloway sent you. She will give you a room and meals for a month, and by then you should be able to find proper paying work. He reached into his coat again and pulled out a small leather pouch. This should help you get started. He pressed the pouch into her hands. She could feel the weight of coins inside. I cannot. You have already done too much. Take it, he said firmly. I have enough. You need it more. The rain was falling harder now, a downpour that sent the remaining auction crowd scattering for real shelter. Penelope looked down at the pouch in her hands, then up at the man who had saved her. Lucas Calloway. She wanted to thank him properly, wanted to ask him why, wanted to understand what kind of man did something like this. But when she looked up, he was already turning away, pulling his hat lower against the rain. Wait, she called out. I do not even know how to thank you. He paused, glanced back over his shoulder. No thanks needed, miss, just live free. That is enough. Then he was walking away, disappearing into the rain-soaked streets of Marfa, and Penelope was left standing in the mud with a pouch of coins and a freedom she had thought lost forever. She did go to Mrs. Chen's boarding house, a tidy place with whitewashed walls and window boxes that would be full of flowers in a kinder season. Mrs. Chen was a small woman with sharp eyes and iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. When Penelope gave Lucas Calloway's name, those sharp eyes softened just a fraction. He sent you, did he? Mrs. Chen looked her up and down, taking in the soaked dress and bedraggled appearance. You look half drowned. Come inside. The room was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out onto the street. Mrs. Chen brought her towels and a simple dress to change into while her own clothes dried by the fire. That first night, Penelope lay in the narrow bed and cried, great shaking sobs of relief and confusion and something else she could not name. She was free. She was truly free. The next morning she went looking for work. Marfa was a small town, barely more than a few dusty streets clustered around the railroad, but it was growing. There were ranches nearby, cattle drives passing through, and people needed services. She tried the general store first, but they had no openings. The hotel said the same. By the end of the day, her feet ached and her heart was heavy. It was Mrs. Chen who suggested the restaurant. Old Tom, who runs the place, has been looking for help since his daughter moved to San Antonio. Food is nothing fancy, but it is honest work and he pays fair. The restaurant was called the Silver Star, though there was nothing silver about it. It was a simple wooden building with a few tables and a menu chalked on a board. Old Tom turned out to be a weathered man of about 60 with kind eyes and hands scarred from years of kitchen work. You know how to cook? He asked. Yes, sir. My mother taught me before she passed. Can you work hard? Customers can be demanding. I can work as hard as anyone. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Be here at dawn tomorrow. We will see how you do. Penelope threw herself into the work with a fierce determination. She arrived before dawn and stayed until the last customer left. She learned the rhythms of the kitchen, the way old Tom liked things done, the regular customers and their usual orders. Her hands grew rough from washing dishes and her back ached from standing all day, but it was her work, done by her choice, and that made all the difference. She saw Lucas Calloway 3 days later. He came into the Silver Star around midday, taking off his hat as he entered. Penelope was carrying plates to a table of ranch hands when she looked up and saw him. Their eyes met across the room, and she nearly dropped the plates. He looked different in the daylight, less like a phantom from the rain. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and without the shadow of his hat, she could see his face clearly. Strong features, that scar on his cheek, and those gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. She finished delivering the plates and walked over to his table, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Calloway, miss." He did not seem surprised to see her there. "I heard you found work. I am glad. Thanks to you." She pulled out her order pad, trying to keep her hands steady. "What can I get you? Whatever the special is will be fine." She nodded and turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "And Miss Garrett, you do not owe me anything. I hope you know that." She looked back at him. "I know, but I am grateful nonetheless." In the kitchen, old Tom raised an eyebrow. "You know Lucas Calloway? He helped me when I needed it most," Penelope said carefully. Old Tom grunted. "Good man, that one. Keeps to himself mostly, has a small ranch a few miles out of town. Runs cattle, does some horse breaking, never causes trouble, pays his debts, treats folks fair." That is high praise in this country. Penelope dished up the stew and cornbread that was the day's special, her mind spinning. She brought it out to Lucas's table and set it down carefully. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up at her. "Of course. Why did you do it? Why did you spend all that money just to set me free?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once on the table. "My mother was sold to pay my father's debts when I was 10 years old. We never saw her again. I swore that if I ever had the chance, I would not let that happen to someone else." He picked up his fork. "I am just glad I had the means to help." Penelope felt something crack open in her chest. "I am sorry about your mother. It was a long time ago." But she could hear the old pain in his voice, the wound that had never fully healed. She was a good woman. She deserved better. "Thank you," Penelope said softly, "for seeing me as a person worth saving." His eyes met hers and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. "You were always worth saving, Miss Garrett. I just provided the means." After that, Lucas came to the Silver Star once or twice a week. He always ordered whatever the special was, always ate quietly, always left a fair tip. And always, Penelope found herself watching for him, her heart lifting when she saw him come through the door. They began to talk, just small conversations at first. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle and horses, about the challenges of making a living from the harsh Texas land. She told him about growing up, about her mother's death, and her father's slow descent into debt and drink, about the fear of standing on that auction block. "You are stronger than you know," he said one afternoon. "Not many people could have held their head up the way you did that day." I did not feel strong. I felt terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it. He pushed his empty plate away. "You have plenty of courage, Miss Garrett. Please," she said. "Call me Penelope. I think we are past formalities." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first real smile she had seen from him. "Then you should call me Lucas." November came, bringing cooler weather and clearer skies. Penelope had been in Marfa for a month, and she felt like she was finally finding her footing. She had saved most of what she earned, carefully hoarding her wages in case hard times came again. Mrs. Chen had extended her stay at the boarding house for a reduced rate, and Penelope had made a few friends among the other women in town. But it was Lucas she thought about most. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his voice, and the way he really listened when she spoke. There was something solid about him, something dependable. And there was something else too, a flutter in her chest when he smiled at her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. She did not let herself think too much about it. He had saved her from bondage, had given her back her freedom. The last thing she wanted was to misread kindness for something more, to burden him with unwanted affection. But then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday, and the Silver Star was busy with cowboys in from a cattle drive. Penelope was rushing between tables, taking orders and delivering food, barely keeping up with the demand. She did not notice the man in the corner watching her until she brought him his coffee. He grabbed her wrist as she turned to go, his grip hard enough to hurt. "Hold on there, sweetheart. Sit and talk with me a while." "I cannot, sir. I have other customers to attend to." She tried to pull her wrist free, but his grip tightened. "I said sit." His voice was ugly now, and she could smell whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "I paid good money for this meal. The least you can do is be friendly. Let me go." Penelope kept her voice firm, but her heart was pounding. Old Tom was in the kitchen and would not hear if she called. "Why?" "You think you are too good for me." The man stood up, still gripping her wrist, pulling her closer. "I saw you at that auction last month. Somebody bought you, which means you are no better than a slave. You should be grateful for any attention you get. The lady asked you to let her go." Lucas's voice cut through the noise of the restaurant, cold and hard as iron. Penelope had not seen him come in, but there he was, standing a few feet away with his hand resting on his belt near where she knew he carried a gun. The drunk man sneered. "This is not your business, Calloway. Move along." "I am making it my business. Let her go. Now." For a moment the whole restaurant went silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen. The drunk man's eyes flickered to Lucas's gun, to the set of his jaw, to the absolute certainty in his stance. Whatever he saw there made him release Penelope's wrist and step back. "Not worth the trouble anyway," the man muttered, throwing coins on the table and stumbling toward the door. Penelope rubbed her wrist where he had grabbed her, fighting back tears of anger and humiliation. Lucas stepped closer, his expression softening. "Are you hurt?" "No, just shaken." She looked up at him. "Thank you again. You should not have to put up with treatment like that. It is part of the job sometimes." She tried to smile to make light of it, but her voice shook. Lucas's jaw tightened. "It should not be." He hesitated, then said, "I have a proposition for you." Penelope's stomach dropped. "What kind of proposition?" "Not like that," he said quickly, seeing her expression. "Nothing untoward, I promise. I need help at the ranch. Cooking, cleaning, general housekeeping. The work is hard, but no harder than here, and you would not have to deal with drunks grabbing at you. I would pay you the same wage you are making now, plus room and board. You would have your own cabin on the property, completely separate from the main house. Your own space, your own privacy." Penelope stared at him. "You want to hire me? I need the help, and you deserve better than this." He gestured at the restaurant, at the table where the drunk had accosted her. "But only if you want to. I do not want you to feel pressured. If you would rather stay here, I will respect that." She should say no. She barely knew him despite their conversations. Going to work at his ranch, living on his property, it could be seen as improper. People would talk, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw only honesty. And more than that, she saw an opportunity. A chance to leave behind the grabbing hands and leering looks, to have work that was just work, to have a measure of safety and peace. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." She talked to Mrs. Chen that evening, sitting in the boarding house parlor while the older woman darned socks by lamplight. "Lucas Calloway is a good man," Mrs. Chen said without looking up from her work. "Known him for 3 years now, ever since he bought that ranch. He works hard, keeps his word, treats everyone with respect. If he says you will have your own space and your own privacy, you will. But people will talk," Penelope said. "People always talk. The question is whether you care more about what they say or about your own well-being." Mrs. Chen nodded off a thread and looked up. "That restaurant work will grind you down eventually. I have seen it happen to too many young women. If you have a chance at something better, something safer, I would take it." Penelope thought about the drunk man's grip on her wrist, about the way some customers looked at her. She thought about Lucas's steady presence, the way he had saved her twice now without asking for anything in return. "I think I will tell him yes," she said quietly. Mrs. Chen nodded. "I think that is wise." The next day, Penelope gave old Tom her notice. He was disappointed but understanding. "You have to do what is best for you, girl. You have been a hard worker and I will miss you. But if Lucas Calloway has offered you a position, that is a good opportunity." A week later, Lucas arrived at the boarding house with a wagon to collect her and her meager belongings. Penelope said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, promising to visit town regularly, and climbed up onto the wagon seat beside Lucas. The ranch was 5 miles outside of Marfa, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by rocky hills. The main house was small but sturdy, built of wood and stone. There was a barn, several corrals, and a small cabin set apart from the other buildings. That was where Lucas led her first. "This will be yours," he said, pushing open the door. "It is not much, but it is sound. I have fixed the roof and the windows, and there is a good stove for cooking and heat." The cabin was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a table, a couple of chairs, and the stove he had mentioned. But it was clean and solid, and most importantly, it was hers. Penelope set down her bag and turned in a slow circle, taking it in. "It is perfect," she said. Lucas showed her around the rest of the property. The main house where he lived, the kitchen where she would do most of the cooking, the barn where he kept his horses. He had 3 ranch hands who came in during the day to help with the cattle and horses, but they did not live on the property. "I mostly need help with meals and keeping the house in order," Lucas explained. "I am not much of a cook myself, and I have been living on beans and jerky for too long. Beyond that, you can structure your days however you like. If you want to help with the horses or the cattle, you are welcome to. If you would rather stick to the house, that is fine too." "What time do you need breakfast?" Penelope asked, already thinking about schedules and meal planning. "Around dawn, if that is not too early. I am used to early mornings." They worked out the details, and Lucas left her to settle into the cabin. Penelope unpacked her few belongings, made up the bed with the quilts Lucas had provided, and sat down at the small table. Through the window, she could see the main house and beyond it, the rolling hills dotted with cattle. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. For the first time in a very long time, Penelope felt something like peace. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Penelope rose before dawn to start breakfast, cooking up eggs and bacon and biscuits for Lucas and the ranch hands. She kept the main house clean, did the laundry, prepared the midday and evening meals. In her spare time, she explored the property, learning the lay of the land. Lucas was an easy man to work for. He was clear about what he needed but never demanding. He thanked her for every meal, every clean shirt, every small task completed. And slowly, carefully, they became friends. He taught her to ride, starting with his gentlest mare. Penelope had never been on a horse before, and the first few times were terrifying, but Lucas was patient. He walked beside the mare, his hand steadying Penelope when she wobbled, his voice calm and encouraging. "You are doing great. Just relax into it. Let the horse do the work." By the end of November, she could ride well enough to accompany him on short trips around the property. They would ride out in the late afternoon when the worst of the day's heat had passed, checking on the cattle and the water sources. Lucas would point out landmarks, tell her stories about the land and the people who had lived here before. "This was Apache territory once," he said one day as they sat on their horses on a ridge overlooking the valley, "before the army pushed them out." Sometimes I think about that, about how this land has seen so much change, so much loss. "Do you ever regret coming here?" Penelope asked. "No, this is home now. But I try to respect what came before, to remember that I am just one person passing through a much longer story." He glanced at her. "Does that make sense?" "It does." She looked out over the valley, at the way the light slanted golden across the grass. "I think I am starting to understand what you mean about this place." December brought colder weather and with it, preparations for winter. Lucas and the ranch hands worked long days repairing fences and buildings, stocking up on feed and supplies. Penelope threw herself into helping, preserving vegetables, organizing the storeroom, making sure everything was ready for the harsh months ahead. She was happy, she realized one evening as she sat in her cabin with a cup of tea, listening to the wind outside. Truly, genuinely happy in a way she had not been since before her mother died. She had work she enjoyed, a safe place to live, and something else she was almost afraid to name. She was falling in love with Lucas Calloway. It had crept up on her slowly. The way her heart jumped when she heard his voice. The way she found excuses to spend time near him. The way she noticed little things, like the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was tired, or the rare, devastating smile that transformed his usually serious face. But she did not say anything. He had saved her, given her work and a place to live. She would not complicate that with feelings he probably did not return. He had never been anything but respectful and kind, treating her like a friend and employee, nothing more. The week before Christmas, Lucas came back from town with a small pine tree tied to his saddle. "Thought we should have some holiday cheer," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "If you want to decorate it, that is. I know it is not much." Penelope felt warmth flood through her. "I think it is wonderful." They set it up in the main house, and Penelope spent an evening making decorations from whatever she could find. Paper stars, strings of dried berries, ribbons saved from packages. It was nothing fancy, but when they lit candles around it on Christmas Eve, it looked beautiful. Lucas had given the ranch hands the day off, so it was just the two of them. Penelope cooked a special dinner, using some of the precious stores she had been saving. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, and a dried apple pie for dessert. They ate by candlelight, the little tree glowing in the corner. The wind howled outside, but inside it was warm and peaceful. After dinner, Lucas poured them each a small glass of whiskey. "I know it is not very ladylike," he said, "but it seems fitting for a toast. What are we toasting?" Penelope asked, accepting the glass. Lucas was quiet for a moment, looking at her across the table. The candlelight played across his features, softening the hard edges, making the scar on his cheek look like a silver thread. "To second chances," he said finally. "And to finding home in unexpected places." They clinked glasses and drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it left a pleasant warmth behind. "I got you something," Lucas said suddenly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. "It is not much, but I thought you might like it." Penelope took the package with shaking hands. Inside was a beautiful hair comb made of polished wood with an inlaid design of flowers. "Lucas, it is beautiful, but you should not have spent the money." I wanted to. He was watching her face carefully. I wanted you to have something nice, something that is yours. Thank you. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, blinking back tears. I am afraid my gift is not as fine. She had knitted him a scarf from yarn she had carefully saved up for, working on it in the evenings in her cabin. It was a simple design, but the stitches were even and tight, and she had made it long enough to wrap around twice. Lucas took it with an expression of wonder. He wrapped it around his neck immediately. It is perfect. I will wear it every day. It is just a scarf. It is the kindest gift anyone has given me in a very long time. His voice was rough with emotion. Thank you, Penelope. The way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. They sat there in the candlelight, looking at each other, and Penelope wondered if he could hear how hard her heart was beating. I should go, she said finally, even though she wanted to stay. It is late. Let me walk you back to your cabin. Outside, the night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. Lucas walked beside her close enough that their arms almost touched. When they reached her cabin door, he stopped. Penelope, I need to tell you something. Her heart was in her throat. What is it? I hired you because you needed work and because I needed help. That was true, but I have to be honest. These past few months working with you, talking with you, it has become about more than that. He took a deep breath. I have feelings for you, real feelings, and I know this might be unwelcome. I know you might not feel the same way, but I could not let another day go by without telling you. Penelope felt like she might float away. You have feelings for me. I do. I know the circumstances are not ideal. You work for me, and I do not want you to feel pressured. If you do not feel the same way, nothing has to change. You will still have your job and your cabin for as long as you want them. I will respect whatever you decide. Lucas. She reached out and took his hand. I feel the same way. I have for a while now. I just did not think you could possibly feel it too. The smile that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Really, really. He stepped closer, and she tilted her face up to his. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for so long, he murmured. I have wanted you to. They stood there in the starlight, holding each other, and Penelope felt like her heart might burst from happiness. This man who had saved her, who had given her freedom and friendship and now love, this was real and right and true. The winter passed in a glow of new love. They were careful around the ranch hands, not wanting to invite gossip, but in the evenings, they would sit together in the main house, talking and reading and simply being together. Lucas was courting her properly, he said, even though the circumstances were unusual. I want to do this right, he told her one evening as they sat by the fire. You deserve to be courted and respected, not just taken for granted because you live on my property. You have always respected me, Penelope said, from the very first day, and I always will. In February, Lucas asked her to marry him. They were out riding, checking on a section of fence when he reined in his horse and turned to her. I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, he said, but I know my heart. I love you, Penelope Garrett. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in March in the small church in Marfa with Mrs. Chen and old Tom and a handful of other friends in attendance. Penelope wore a simple dress of pale blue, and Lucas wore his best suit with the scarf she had knitted him. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The years that followed were good ones. They worked the ranch together, building it into something prosperous and sustainable. Lucas proved to be not just a good husband but a true partner, asking her opinion on decisions, valuing her thoughts and ideas. They expanded the herd, improved the bloodlines of their horses, made careful improvements to the property. In the spring of 1884, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Lucas was overjoyed, fussing over her and trying to keep her from working too hard. She laughed at his hovering but loved him for it. Their son was born in December of that year, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Matthew. 2 years later, a daughter arrived whom they called Rose, then another son, James, in 1889. The ranch house, once so quiet, filled with the noise and chaos of children. Lucas was a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching the children to ride and rope and care for the animals. Penelope watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. They never forgot where they had come from, though. Every year on the anniversary of that rainy October day when Lucas had bought her contract and burned it, they would sit together after the children were in bed and remember. "I think about what my life might have been," Penelope said one such evening when Matthew was 15 and the younger children were growing fast. "If you had not been there that day, if you had not cared enough to help." "I think about what my life would be without you," Lucas replied, his hand finding hers. "Empty, meaningless. You brought light and love and purpose to everything." "We saved each other," Penelope said. "Yes, I think we did." The children grew and thrived. Matthew showed a talent for horses, with gentle hands and an intuitive understanding of the animals. Rose had her mother's organizational skills and her father's determination. James was the dreamer, always sketching and imagining, but he could work as hard as anyone when needed. When Matthew was 18, he told his parents he wanted to start his own ranch someday. Lucas and Penelope listened carefully to his plans, then offered him a portion of their land to get started. "Family helps family," Lucas said. "That is what we do." Rose married a young veterinarian who came through Marfa and decided to stay. They built a house on the edge of town, and Rose balanced raising her own children with helping her husband in his practice. James eventually moved to San Antonio to study art, but he came home often, bringing his paintings of the West Texas landscape that hung in the ranch house and made Penelope's heart swell with pride. Lucas and Penelope grew older together, their hair graying, their faces weathering like the land around them. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by years of partnership and shared experiences. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house and yard filled with family, with laughter and stories and love. Penelope stood on the porch, watching it all, and felt Lucas's arms slip around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I am the luckiest woman alive. I am the lucky one. You could have walked away that day when I gave you your freedom. You could have gone anywhere, done anything, but you stayed. I stayed because of you. Because you showed me what real goodness looks like. Because you gave me not just freedom, but love and family and a life beyond anything I ever imagined." Lucas turned her to face him, his gray eyes still as clear and steady as they had been that rainy day in Marfa so many years ago. "I love you, Penelope Calloway. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," she said. "Always." He kissed her there on the porch, surrounded by the sounds of their family in the golden afternoon light of the West Texas sun. And Penelope thought about that girl standing on an auction block in the rain, terrified and alone, and wished she could tell her that everything would be all right. That a man with kind eyes and a generous heart would save her, would love her, would give her a life more beautiful than any dream. The years continued to pass gently. Lucas and Penelope watched their grandchildren grow, helped where they could, and enjoyed the peace of lives well lived. They still rode together when the weather was good, still sat by the fire in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. When Lucas was 68, he fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then weakness that kept him in bed more and more. The doctor said his lungs were failing, probably from years of dust and hard work. There was nothing to be done except keep him comfortable. Penelope nursed him through those final weeks with the same fierce devotion she had brought to everything in their life together. She sat by his bed, read to him, held his hand, told him stories of their children and grandchildren. "I am not afraid," Lucas told her one afternoon. "I have had a good life, a full life, and it was all because of you." "We built it together," Penelope said, her voice breaking. "Promise me you will not stop living when I am gone. Promise me you will still ride out to that ridge we loved, still watch the sunsets, still enjoy every day." "I promise." He died peacefully in his sleep on a clear spring morning in 1913, with Penelope holding his hand and the sun streaming through the window. She cried for the loss of him, for the empty space he left behind. But even in her grief, she felt grateful. Grateful for every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear and quiet evening together. The family gathered again, this time for a funeral. They buried Lucas on a hill overlooking the valley with a simple stone marker that read, "Lucas Calloway, beloved husband and father." Penelope stood by the grave long after everyone else had gone back to the house, saying her private goodbyes. She kept her promise to him. She continued to live at the ranch with Matthew's help managing the daily operations. She still rode out to their favorite places, still watched the sunsets, still found joy in her children and grandchildren. The grief never fully left, but it softened over time, becoming a sweet ache instead of a sharp pain. Penelope lived another 9 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Lucas for so many years, with a smile on her face as if she was dreaming of something beautiful. They buried her next to Lucas on the hill, adding to her marker Penelope Calloway, beloved wife and mother. The family continued to work the ranch, generation after generation, and the story of how it all began was passed down like a treasured heirloom. The story of a rainy October day in 1882, when a young woman stood on an auction block and a young man did something extraordinary. When a piece of paper burned in the mud and freedom was given freely. When two people found each other in the hardest of circumstances and built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The ranch still stands, over 100 years later, run by Lucas and Penelope's great-great-grandchildren. And if you visit on a clear day and climb to the top of the hill where two simple stone markers stand side by side, you can look out over the valley and see the land they loved, the home they built together, the legacy of their love stretching into a future they could never have imagined but hoped for with all their hearts.